Lois, is this your last meeting?
And we are now live.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We have our quorum, so we'll go forward. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So item number 2 is approval of minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? Any errors or omissions? None so being, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. And a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Lois. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Approval of order of business, approval of additions and deletions. Dorothy, are there any additions or deletions?
No additions or deletions have been received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along to the next one. We need a motion for the order of business. Can I have a mover for that, please?
I so move, David.
Thank you, David. And a seconder?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Moving on. Motion carried. There's no business arising out of the minutes, and we'll have a call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare as a result of any agenda items today? No item, no conflicts. None so being. We have no deferred business, item 6. And do we have any correspondence, petitions, or delegations, Dorothy?
Yes, we do have correspondence for agenda item 9.1.2, and this was circulated to the committee members.
Yes, thank you. Petitions. Does any members of the committee have petitions to bring forward? None so being. And presentations. Are any members of the committee or Dorothy, are there presentations to be made at this time?
No presentation today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, items brought forward, none. Reports 9.1.1 case H00560, substantial alteration to the municipally registered heritage property at 53 Queen Street, Dartmouth, and the staff member is Elizabeth Cushing, who will be doing our presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen here. And Chair, could you confirm that you can see my screen?
I haven't seen it. Oh, here it is. It's here now.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. My name is Elizabeth Cushing. I'm a heritage planner with Planning and Development, and I'll be presenting the substantial alteration application for 53 Queen Street. This is an application that was submitted by RAD Architects on behalf of the property owners for 53 Queen Street. The municipally registered heritage property is known as the Dartmouth Post Office and was built circa 1914. There was an addition circa 1947 on the Wentworth elevation and another in 1961 on the Queen Street elevation, known as the Annex. The proposal includes substantially altering the property to permit the reconstruction of the 1961 Annex for townhouse purposes, open space and accessibility upgrades, relocation of the War Memorial, modifications to existing window openings, and infill of the parking lot with a 90-meter mixed-use development. The subject property is located on Queen Street, and there's also frontage on King and Wentworth Streets. In accordance with Section 17 of the Heritage Property Act, a substantial alteration application to a municipal heritage property requires both Heritage Advisory Committee and Regional Council approval. The heritage value of the Dartmouth Post Office relates to the circa 1914 Edwardian Baroque-style civic building. This includes the cornice line, 5-bay symmetrical facade with large voussoirs, large sills, string course, post office inscription stone, molded lintels and brackets, and granite foundation. Some work has been completed to date on the property outside of these processes, including a new perimeter drain and waterproofing around the 1914 and 1947 portions of the building, and this was completed under BPCOM 2022-04326. This involved the careful disassembly, documentation, and storage of the granite steps along the Queen and Wentworth Street elevations. The granite stairs will be rebuilt to meet building code requirements. The first substantial alteration proposed includes the deconstruction of the 1961 Annex addition to be rebuilt to accommodate townhouse units. So the existing window openings will be used when creating the new entrances. The informal public open space along the Queen Street elevation that currently exists will be continued in the proposed development. There will be accessibility improvements, including a new ramp to meet current standards. There will also be the addition of planters, seating areas, and hardscaping. The War Memorial, which is currently in front of the Annex addition, will be relocated to act as a separation between the post office and the Annex and to encourage pedestrian interaction. Window openings at the rear elevation will become patio doors for residential purposes, so this section here. One of these doors will be using an existing window opening. However, the other will need to be made within the sandstone cladding, so this one here. Another window opening at the south elevation here will become a door to connect the post office to the new construction. Lastly, the construction of a 90-meter mixed-use development is proposed for the current surface-level parking lot. There will be 2 townhouse units at the ground level of the new addition immediately adjacent to the Annex. There will be ground floor commercial and the remainder will be residential. The new construction will also include 2 levels of underground parking and bike parking at street level. In terms of staff's evaluation of the proposal, the heritage value is linked to the original circa 1914 portion of the post office. So the Annex addition is not an original feature. However, it will be rebuilt using the existing sandstone blocks or replaced in kind if necessary. Character-defining elements of the post office will be rehabilitated and preserved. Most new entrances will use the existing window openings. The one new entrance will not be visible from the street and is required to accommodate the new residential use. Modifications to the surrounding open space will distinguish and highlight the historic building, improve accessibility, and encourage pedestrian interaction with the heritage resource. And the relocation of the War Memorial will also encourage pedestrian interaction. The new addition was designed to minimally impact the post office in terms of its physical connection, setbacks, materials, and massing. The new addition will be attached through a glass breezeway at the second story on the south elevation of the post office to ensure minimal impact to the character-defining elements. The setback of the podium will be consistent with the setback of the post office. It will also provide a consistent open space area along the Queen Street elevation. The mid-rise portion of the addition will be set back with most of its massing away from the post office to further ensure the prominence of the historic building. Sandstone cladding is also proposed for a portion of the podium along King Street, to complement the post office. This is the third step of the substantial alteration process. So should the Heritage Advisory Committee approve, the substantial alteration will proceed to Regional Council for their review. This is just a quick reminder that the development agreement will also return to Heritage Advisory Committee for their review. The following recommendations before you today for your consideration. Thank you.
Chairman. Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Brian, I think you're on mute.
My fault, sorry.
I'll
Council,
put the motion on the floor to start debate. Move that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council approve the proposed substantial alteration of 53 Queen Street, Dartmouth, which includes the rehabilitation and conservation of the circa 1914 former Dartmouth Post Office designed to the Edwardian Baroque style.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Elizabeth to go back and look at the streetscape design?
Sure.
I'm more
We
curious
need a
about.
seconder, Mr. Chair. Sorry
we're
to
gonna need a
interrupt.
Yeah.
seconder for the motion.
Yeah, we need a seconder. Sorry.
This
I'll
is
second
Patrick.
that,
I'll be
David.
happy to
I'll
second it.
second it. Yep.
Thank you.
So we go back and look at the streetscape and landscaping. I'm just curious about accessibility to the building. I saw staircases and below grade stairwells and stuff. I'm just kind of curious. I see, okay, there's appears to be a ramp in behind the clock there. Okay. All right. I just couldn't catch that in the first presentation. Just was curious about that. Okay, I'm happy now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion?
This is Patrick. Overall, I'm very happy with the proposal, and I can say that having used this post office frequently my entire life.
Mhm.
But I was wondering if we could maybe get clarification about the granite steps that they've been removed now. Are they going to be reinstalled in some form? I wasn't sure about that.
Excellent question.
Through you, Chair, yes, the intent would be to rebuild them so that they meet the current building standards.
Okay.
All of the granite has been disassembled and it's being stored off-site until further intervention.
Okay.
And I'm assuming current standards, they won't be quite as steep as they were.
Could you flip between this picture and the streetscape proposal?
Mhm.
So it appears the steps will be coming out further. It looks like they're having a walkway in front of the building now. Is that how it appears to me? There's going to be a pedestrian pedway along the handrails between the building and the side of their elevated pedestal there, and then the steps come down from that. So from my perspective, it looks like the steps are coming out further from the building.
It does appear that way.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, yes, I believe that would be the case. This would have a little bit of a podium here to access the entryways. It would still be within the property lines, of course.
So those marble steps probably to be brought out further. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion? No, none so being. I'm going to call for the question. Those in favor?
Sorry, Chair, I think Lois had a question.
Sorry?
Lois had a
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry, Lois. I
Thank
lost my
you,
screen for a
Dorothy.
second. Yeah.
I'm interested, Elizabeth. There seems to be townhouses below grade. Am I correct? And I'm thinking back to the slide deck that was circulated earlier today. And this is a little peculiar. I remember when we were talking 3-4 years ago about the College Street development, the Ruvalis proposal, the College and the side street, which I have forgotten the name of, Carlton. There were going to be below grade entrances or window wells or something there. And there was debate about it, but I do not recall what the conclusion was. I believe there was some concern about having below grade entrances. Has any thought been given to that now? This is, I believe, a departure from the original post office.
Through you, Chair, to the member, there hasn't been any concerns identified. Like this application would have gone through the team review process where we discuss with internal staff, so engineers, and that has never come up as being a notice of contention. I am not overly familiar with the Carlton Street one. I'm not sure if my manager, Aaron, wanted to add to that, but in regards to this proposal in particular, there hasn't been any concerns identified for below grade.
Okay, then I am satisfied, and through the chair, my thanks to you, Elizabeth.
Anyone else with comments or questions? None so being, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor, any opposed?
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carried. Next item on our agenda, amendments to the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy and Associated Development Agreement for lands located at Robie Street, Spring Garden Road, and Carlton Street, Halifax. And Luke Willett is our principal planner, and we're making a presentation for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to the committee members. I'm just going to share my presentation. Okay, so can you see my presentation, Mr. Chair?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Let me go back. I'm not actually familiar with Zoom. Where do I share the presentation from? Oh, share the screen. There we go. Okay.
We'll let you know.
At the bottom where it says share screen, I think that's what you share.
Okay. For some reason, it doesn't seem to want to. Is it something, Dorothy, that you could maybe
Yes,
control
I
the
could
slide
share your
deck?
presentation. Yep, just one
Okay.
second.
Thank you.
And everyone see the screen?
Not yet.
We can now.
There, we have it now.
Okay, thank you. So the application before the committee today is case 20218. It's considered the Spring Garden West. It's the name of the application that's used in the public realm. So the application is for both an MPS amendment as well as a development agreement process. This has been before the Heritage Advisory Committee on a number of occasions, but this is kind of like we're in the final stretch, and I'll go into the details on the application. So the applicant is Dexel Development Limited, and the application is located at 1403 Robie Street, 5950 to 5994 Spring Garden Road, and 1478 to 1494 Carlton Street. And it was mentioned before the Ruvalis project. This is just a neighboring property from that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the site context, the size of the subject lands are 4,900 square meters. And the subject lands have frontages on three streets, Robie, Springer Road, as well as Carlton Street. Next slide, please. In terms of the generalized future land use of the site, the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy identified the site as a center, which is a mixed-use kind of designation. Next slide, please. And the zoning for the site is actually broken up into two different zones. So the lands on Carlton Street are zone CEN 1, and the balance of the site, or actually the entire block, is CEN 2. So the CEN 2 is a more robust zone that allows more height as well as more uses. The CEN 1 is more of a transition type of zoning. Next slide, please. In terms of heritage context, there are 4 properties that are currently municipally registered, and they're shown in the kind of red highlighted areas. So there's 4 properties there. Next slide. In terms of the land use policy context, the regional secondary municipal planning strategy has policy IM 42, and it states the following: developments in the Spring Garden Road, Robie Street special area, which consists of Site A and Site B, as shown on map 24, shall only proceed either through the as-of-right allowances under the land use bylaw or to the development agreement policy for Site A and Site B as set out in policies IM 43, IM 44, IM 45, and IM 46. So the site that we're talking about is actually Site A on map 24. And the policies that apply if we're to pursue a development agreement process would be policies IM 43 and IM 44. Next slide, please. So in terms of the proposal, the Spring Garden West proposal consists of 3 main components. The first one is to rehabilitate the 4 municipally registered heritage buildings that are located at 1478 to 1494 Carlton Street. So those were the ones in the red on the previous slide. The second part of the proposal is to demolish the rest of the building stock on the development site. So those would be the lands fronting on Robie as well as on Robie and Spring Garden Road. And on those subject lands where the rest of the building stock would be demolished, the plan is to build a 30-story mixed-use residential and commercial building. Next slide, please. In terms of the heritage properties, I'm going to go through each one of them separately. So for 1478 Carlton Street, it was constructed in 1890 by Edmund Smith. It's a 2-story Queen Anne style dwelling with mansard roof and dormers. It features a side hall design, and the lot area is approximately 300 square meters. Next slide, please. 1480 and 1484 Carlton Street was built in 1860, and it also predates the 1871 subdivision of Carlton Street. There are actually 2 separate properties that each contain a semi-detached mirror image residence, and the lot area for each of those is 290 square meters. There's a side hall design, 2-story Italianate-style duplex with truncated roof and shed dormers. Next slide, please. In terms of 1494 Carlton Street, it contains 2 adjoining structers on a consolidated lot, which totals 479 square meters. It was actually originally built in 1860 by G.W. Rulin, and it also predates the approval of the original subdivision for Carlton Street. Next slide, please. There has been significant exterior renovation completed in 1990 for the property, and the renovation simplified the Second Empire architectural elements, siding, as well as the roof lines. It was consolidated and physically, It was consolidated and physically attached to 5950 Springer Road, which is proposed to be demolished as part of this proposal. Margaret Marshall Saunders was the most significant resident of the house, and she was an author and was that passed away in 1947. Next slide, please. In terms of substantial alteration approval, the Heritage Advisory Committee already reviewed a concurrent application for substantial alteration to the 4 municipally registered heritage properties on December 12, 2018. And the application for substantial alteration was approved by Regional Council on January 29, 2019. Next slide, please. In terms of the alterations that were approved for 1478 Carlton, we had the removal of a portion of the rear wing of 1478 Carlton Street, and this was to facilitate the subdivision of the property as well as shortening the rear yard. Next slide, please. For 1480 and 1484 Carlton Street, we have restoration of the original central chimneys, replacement of modern rear windows with new windows in keeping with the building's character. We have removal of modern dormer windows on the front and rear, and restoration of the original 2/2 single hung windows. Next slide, please. In terms of 1494 Carlton Street, we had removal of the attached dwelling and breezeway to allow for the construction of a commercial access as well as the construction of a new building podium. There's also undertaking of a complete restoration to its original form and configuration, and that would have been based on photographic and archival evidence. In terms of additional heritage consideration, the applicant is proposing to subdivide all 4 subject properties, those are the municipally registered properties, to allow for a larger development site for the 30-story mixed-use residential and commercial building. When a heritage property is subdivided, the registration remains on title for all resulting parcels. Slide. So this might not be too visible to you, but it kind of shows that the heritage properties will roughly be subdivided in half, and the back portion would then go on to the parcel that will contain the 30-story building. Next slide, please. So following subdivision approval, the proposed DA would require that these new resulting parcel will need to be deregistered. The rear yards are not considered character defining elements, and therefore the subdivision is not considered to be a substantial alteration. As I've said, the substantial alteration has already been approved, but there will be a need to deregister those back portion in the future. Next slide, please. In terms of the proposal, this shows the site plan. It shows the 4 heritage dwelling that will remain on Carleton Street. And then it shows the building outline for the 30-story building, as well as the outlines for the tower. As you can see, there is an access to the underground parking on Carleton Street between 1494 Carleton Street, as well as 1484 Carleton Street. And there's also a back driveway that goes behind the building that has its access on Spring Garden Road and will come off on Roby. Next slide, please. So the proposal is for a 4-story podium with 2 26-story towers on top of that 4-story podium, which results in a total of about 30 stories in total. Next view, please. So this shows the perspective view from the corner of Spring Garden Road and Roby Street. Next view, please. This is the perspective view from Coburg Road. Next slide, please. This is the perspective view from the corner of Spring Garden Road and Carleton Street. And this is the perspective view from closer up from Spring Garden Road. Next one, please. Here we see the pedestrian perspective along Spring Garden Road. Next view, please. This is one that may be of more interest to the community. So this would be the perspective view from Carleton Street itself. Now, it's set back and it's kind of imagining there's no building in behind you, but kind of shows like what potentially be looking like. And then the next slide, please. So here we have more of a closer up of the Carleton Street properties as well, with the tower behind it. As you can see, between 1894 and 1884 Carleton Street, there is a ramp that goes down to the underground parking. So that's what will provide access to that underground parking that will serve the 30-story tower in behind it. Next slide, please. Interesting to note, so part of the proposal, and this was part of the proposal that's currently before the committee, was submitted to HRM back in June of 2021, and it actually had these signature architectural projections on it. So they are kind of areas that are glassed in. They occupy the full heights of the units, and they project out by a couple of meters. So they're kind of causing an issue, and that's why we're into a potential MPS amendment process. So if we go to the next slide, please. So we were considering these under just a straightforward agreement, and we were going to be building in some flexibility in the agreement to allow for the projections. However, it was decided it would be best to pursue a plan amendment process to make sure that they were in keeping with the current policy set. So there's been there's been a request made that we amend the regional center secondary municipal planning strategy. So these would be the policy sets that are the enabling policy sets to allow for the projections. And so 3 are directly linked to the projections, or actually 4. There's one on the other slide. But so the amendments are in terms to accommodate the signature architectural projection, we would need to increase the permitted maximum floor area ratio for development from 8 to 9.1, because it actually adds to the floor area of the building. We would also need to increase the allowable floor area for tower floors located above the street wall from 750 square meters per floor to 810 square meters per floor. And there would also need to be a reduction in the minimum separation distance required between any tower portions of the building from 23 meters to 19 meters. And later on during questions, I can get more into detail if the members of the committee wants to go there. Next slide, please. In terms of additional proposed amendments, we would be identifying signature architectural projections as secondary elements in setback and step back requirements. We would, at the request of the applicant, we would also identify a 1-story residential penthouse as a rooftop feature that could exceed the overall maximum height of 90 meters. So it'd be a single-story residential penthouse is what's being proposed. Next slide, please. And then these are the rest of the MPS amendments that are being proposed. There's been a request by the applicant to permit a 2% tolerance for maximum building heights, street wall heights, and building podium heights. And there's also been requests that we allow for the consideration of opportunities for collaboration with the development on the neighboring site, which would be the Ruvalis site, which is identified as Site B on map 24 of the municipal planning strategy. Next slide. In terms of the proposed development agreement that is in front of the committee, I just wanted to highlight some of what's in there. So it identified the permitted land uses, also the project phasing. It also goes into some discussion about obviously the building, the siting, the massing, and the scale of the building. The architectural requirements are covered. There's also requirements for the rehabilitation of the 4 municipally registered heritage buildings. So that's part of the agreement. That's why it's before the committee, because it's coming in as a package. The DA also deals with the subdivision of lands, access, circulation, and parking. Next slide, please. It also deals with the requirements for landscaping, lighting, signage, solid waste, maintenance of the site. It deals with incentive or bonus zoning, and the reason I'm emphasizing it here is because it does involve heritage properties. 90% of the incentive or bonus zoning can be geared towards the cost of the rehabilitation of those 4 buildings. So that's what 90% of the bonus zoning will be used for. We're not yet decided about the last 10%, but that could also likely go for the heritage property as well. In terms of wind mitigation measures, issues were identified during the wind study, and so we've added wind mitigation measures as part of the development agreement to correct some of those issues that have been identified. The DA also talks about streets and municipal service as well as environmental protection measures. Next slide, please. In terms of public feedback, public engagement feedback, there had been an original meeting back in 2018, and the minutes of those that meeting is attached to the report. However, it actually had to do with a previous proposal that was a bit different, but kind of keeping in the same form. But one of the towers is much lower. We did do another mail out to property owners and residents within the notification area, and that was done on September 13th. That was to inform them of the new municipal planning strategy, as well as re-highlight the fact that the application was still active, and we did upload all of the updated drawings to the website. So we did send out 886 mail notification, and we received 11 responses back, and 9 were emails and 2 were phone calls. Sorry. Next slide, please. In terms of the feedback received, the main concerns are highlighted on this slide as well as the next one. So the main concerns raised with the project included the following: that the proposed policy changes would move away from the consistent application of existing policy. There's concerns with the eventual construction phase, including construction debris and blasting. There were concerns raised about the cumulative impacts of traffic and the mental health of residents on Peninsula Halifax. Next slide, please. There was concerns raised about the information provided to the public. In their opinion, was vague, incomplete, and not targeted to laypersons. And finally, there was a concern raised that the application was not aggressive enough with both height and density, and it would not help to resolve the housing crisis. Next slide, please. So now I'll just go over the recommendation. There are actually 5 recommendations. So I'll start. So it is recommended that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council 1 give first reading to consider proposed amendments to the Regional Centre Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy as set out in Attachment A of the report to broaden the scope of enabling policies IM 43, IM 44, and IM 46 and schedule a public hearing. And 2, on the next slide, adopt the proposed amendments to the Regional Centre Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy as set out in Attachment A of the report. It is further recommended that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that the Halifax and West Community Council 3 give notice of motion to consider the proposed development agreement as set out in Attachment B of the report to permit a 30-story mixed-use residential and commercial building on the southeast corner of Roby Street and Spring Garden Road intersection, while rehabilitating 4 municipally registered heritage buildings on Carleton Street. The public hearing for the development agreement shall be held concurrently with that indicated in recommendation 1. 4, provisionally approve the proposed development agreement for a 30-story mixed-use residential and commercial building on the southeast corner of the Roby Street and Spring Garden Road intersection, while rehabilitating 4 municipally registered heritage building on Carleton Street, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in Attachment B of the report. And 5, require that the development agreement contained in Attachment B of the report be signed by the property owner within 120 days or any extension thereof granted by council on requests of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligation arising hereunder shall be at an end. Thank you.
Sorry, Brian, you are on mute.
Sorry, because it's cold, I'm muted. That was a very extensive motion. Thank you. One of the things we got, today in our correspondence was asking us not to go forward with this particular motion. Did anyone want to speak to that, or they wouldn't even have a chance to review it? I just noticed it this morning when I logged on. Okay, let's just file that away. Do we have a mover for this motion? No one's going to move? Oh, lost my screen. There we go.
No one wants
So
to read
move,
it all.
Mr. Chairman. I don't think I need to repeat what Luke read, though.
What was
I'll
that?
move the
Sorry.
motion.
You move it?
I'll
Thank
move
you.
the
Councillor.
motion, but I don't think I need to repeat it, though.
No, not at all. Thank you. It's quite extensive. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
Tyler here, and I'll second.
Thank you, Tyler. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, none so being. I'll call for the...
Actually,
Oh,
sorry, this is Patrick.
Hey, Patrick.
Through the chair, I was wondering if we could maybe get some clarification on the status of 1494 Carlton Street. That's the property that sits on the corner of Carlton and Spring Garden. It is at the moment physically attached to 5950 Spring Garden Road. And I believe for the purposes of the Heritage Property Act, it's also legally attached to 1494 Carlton Street. And yet 5950 Spring Garden is slated to be demolished. So I was wondering if we could get some clarification on that property, because as far as I knew, it hasn't been separated yet from the Carlton Street property.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Staff have a commentary on that?
I'm not sure if Aaron Murnahan is on the call. He would have probably did the substantial alteration report for this application.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at the updated property boundaries to think, but I don't believe that any subdivision has taken place. But essentially, the registration document that speaks to that property speaks only to 1494, the building itself. And that was discussed in the substantial alteration approval that was brought to this committee and to regional council. So council has considered the fact that those buildings are attached and that the rear addition would be removed, and that would be appropriate, given that the Spring Garden Road facing portion of that building was not the object of the heritage registration, nor is it considered a character defining element of the property.
So in and of itself, it's not registered, that's secondary property.
That's correct. It's because it's on the same property, it is technically registered, but it's not considered a character defining element. So all the character defining elements of the property are associated with the 1494 building itself. That's correct. And it was felt by the committee and council at the time that the restoration efforts that we're going to bring that corner building back to what it looked like when Margaret Saunders lived there, the author, that was appropriate, you know, given the commemoration efforts that would take place surrounding that individual.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does that clarify that, Patrick?
Yes, thank you.
Great, okay. Any other discussion or questions? None so being, I will call the question on the motion. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? None so being, motion passed. Motion carried. Next item, our proposed meeting schedule. Okay, item 9.1.3. Do we have a motion to accept that meeting schedule?
I'll make that motion. David?
Okay. Thank you, David. And a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Pam. Any discussion on the meeting schedule?
This is Patrick again.
Yes.
This is my last meeting, so it's a bit of a moot point for me, but I would very much encourage that we move back to in-person meetings at City Hall, which is apparently an option. We are the only committee, city committee, that's still meeting by Zoom since COVID ended. And I found meeting at City Hall, we had much better discussions, and it was also nice. I mean, there are people on this committee that I'm never going to get to meet in person, and that sucks. So I hope you will consider. I know everyone has different timing schedules, etc. But I hope you'll consider meeting in person.
I totally agree with you.
Dorothy can perhaps give us some feedback on what's available and timing, etc. But I just thought I'd throw that out there.
What's the feeling of the committee? How do we feel about reverting to in-person meetings?
It bothered me, Mr. Chairman, but I did find that we did a lot more quorum when we had them online, but that's one advantages of trying to get out of traffic.
Yeah. Pam?
Yes, thank you. So there are committees that still meet on Zoom and meet virtually. And the reason is because it's easier for people to connect at this time of day in particular. Or, it's easier for people to take some time off during their day to meet virtually rather than include the time of the meeting as well as the travel time. But what some of the other committees do, and Dorothy probably speak to this, is they have some virtual and some in person. So at least you're right, like to have the opportunity to come together and meet in person, you know, and it just and build relationships and build dialogue is certainly an added value of in person. At the same time, we don't want it to be onerous for people to have to travel downtown if you're far, you know, or your transit connection is long. So I think we can certainly keep that in mind for the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And get the best of both worlds. We were trying for one in-person meeting this year, but we just couldn't make it work. So maybe that's something we'll address as we go forward into the next year, try and arrange some in-person meetings so we get to see each other live. Okay.
Well, call for question.
Yes, question. I think where was that? All in favor of accepting the meeting schedule as posted?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? None. Any committee member updates? I must say at this time, for those who was their last meeting, thank you for your service. It's been wonderful having you. And it will be your final meeting on this round for you.
I think Lois may have a question.
Lois.
I do. Not a question, but a thank you to everyone. This is my last meeting as well, Patrick. It's been 6 years. I have learned immeasurably. I've worked with great committee members. We have a sound committee going forward. I've noticed the improvement in specialized skill sets and interests that have come forward over the last 6 years. And I want to also thank the staff, the heritage planners, all of the people who contribute to these Zoom meetings and in-person ones. The support has been very, very strong and has enabled us, I think, to make good decisions. So I'm going forward in other directions. Maybe we will meet again. Thank you so much for the experience.
Thank you. Hope we will meet again in other directions, as you say.
Yes.
So now that we've approved the meeting schedule, our next meeting will be on January the 17th, at least according to my notes. But this is 2023, so I don't know. We may want to double check that. We might mean the 24th, and I haven't got a calendar in front of me. Anyway, I'm sure we'll hear from Dorothy about exactly when it is. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I think Aaron, do you have your...
I'm sorry, Aaron, didn't see that. Yeah.
Just want to sneak in really quickly. Thank you so much to departing members and to Lois for all of the service that you've done on behalf of staff. And want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a happy new year as well, because this committee will not be meeting again until 2024. So thank you all for your service.
Thank you. And yes, as early as it seems, it is happy holidays. And a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Thank you. Thank you for your last motion,
You,
Lois.
Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Take care.
care.